Bonjour, good morning. I feel very honoured to have been invited by EVA and the other organisations to come and join with you in your Parliament this morning. My name is James Crowe. Je suis irlandais. J'habite Cardiff pour 28 ans. So I have lived in Pays de Galles for many years and studied in Pays de Galles for many years. So I hope I bring some Celtic greetings to my colleagues here in Wallonia. I am here as Director of Learning Disability Wales, which is an umbrella body for NGOs active in the field of learning disability in Pays de Galles. We are some 90 NGOs. That includes service providing organisations, groups of people with learning disabilities, people first groups, and parent carer organisations. So we play a lobbying, information providing and training role within Wales. I am also honoured to be a Vice President of the European Association of Service Providers for people with a disability, and that organisation has a network of over 10,000 organisations spread across all of the European countries, including many of the countries that are within the Council of Europe rather than just within the European Union. So I believe we do have a strong role to play in contributing to a better society for disabled people, working alongside people with disabilities expressing their own opinions and their own views themselves. So, some information, basic information about Pays de Galles. We are a population of 3 million. We are less ethnically diverse than England, far less ethnically diverse than England. Only 2.1% of our population is non-white. 57% of the population identify ourselves as being Welsh only, rather than British or English or some other identity. And 19% of the population speaks Welsh. Welsh is an ancient Celtic language, and it has equality of status within Wales. So all publications that are official, all correspondence from utility bodies, any other communications have to be provided in the language of preference of the person who is being contacted. And my own organisation, we have to produce, and we are happy to produce, our website and our publications both in English and in Welsh. We are different, unfortunately, in some other respects too, from England and many other countries in Europe, in that we have a very high incidence of long-term illness and chronic disability. So 33% of the population report some form of illness or disability. We are much poorer than England. We only have 74% of the gross value added of the UK average. And in employment terms, or unemployment terms, I should say that 25.6% of our population is described as economically inactive. So I believe there are some parallels with Wallonia. We are a country which has a very large rural hinterland, but most of the wealth that was created in Wales was created in the 19th century and in the early 20th century through manufacturing, and particularly the extraction of coal in huge quantities which went all over the world, the production of steel, which was again exported very widely, and other manufacturing activities. Now practically all of those activities have gone. There is a little bit of open cast mining for coal, but that is all. So the very large employment base that was provided by the coal mines in South Wales particularly went in the 1960s and 1970s. So we have a huge legacy of endemic unemployment in our coal producing areas of Wales and in other formerly industrialised areas. So that's the context for us. Just a word or two politically about us. Again, compared to England, we are our political centre is much more to the left. What we would call our Labour Party, which is one would argue whether it's a socialist party or not, but certainly it has held primacy within Wales for many years. Members of the Conservative Party in Wales are more to the left than their counterparts in England. So our culture is much more left-wing. Our culture is much more about provision of service by municipalities and of a paternalistic approach to supporting citizens within our society. That has started to fragment in recent years, including a significant political party representing a national identity for Wales and seeking greater independence. The cultural differences within Wales led to the creation of an assembly in 1998 for Wales, a national assembly, and that ensured that not only did we have a lot of executive autonomy, operational autonomy for government policies, but we actually added a legislative independence for policies internal to Wales. So the National Assembly for Wales now has control of health, social services, education, and most of the other key planning regulations and legislation within Wales. And the National Assembly for Wales now has primary lawmaking powers. So that's some of the basics about Welsh background. So I think that there are parallels with your very separate and unique identity within Wallonia. Before 1983, most people with an intellectual disability in Wales were either cared for at home by their parents, or they lived in what were called hospitals, mental handicap hospitals and hostels. At the current time, out of the population of about 3 million people today, assessments vary, but the considered view is that we have about 17,000 people with an intellectual disability, children, young people and adults with a significant intellectual disability. In 1983, we had 3,400 people living in institutions, hospitals, people living on wards and villas of perhaps 15, 16 people. People did not have separate rooms. People were often bathed and washed communally. Often people didn't have their own clothes. And that was only in 1983. There were a number of abuse scandals at that point, of abuse within those institutions. And the Welsh administration, it didn't have a separate legislative body at that stage, but the Welsh administration recognised that action had to happen and take place. And a path was embarked on to create community patterns of service. And those services were all to be guided by 3 principles, which have very strong parallels with the UN Convention on the Rights of Disabled Persons. So from the top, 3 principles were established. Those principles were that people with an intellectual disability had a right to an ordinary pattern of life in the community. They had a right to be treated as individuals, and they had a right to expect additional help and support to help them live in the community. So what were the characteristics of the services, the new patterns of community-based services that have evolved in Wales? The services were rooted in an approach which was based on individual need and increasingly based on being person-centred, being designed to meet the needs of the individual. They have and had to be community-based, not set in remote, secluded, segregated settings. They had to be designed to encourage independence. There had to be opportunities for people to speak up, and if they were not able to speak up or communicate their wishes in whatever form they preferred, then they should be able to have assistance and support to express their opinions. Another key characteristic was that there should be support for carers, family carers, and that services should be planned, designed, and organised by the municipalities through our social service departments. There was a recognition that people with a learning disability were not unwell, they were not going to be cured. The medical model of disability was irrelevant and destructive. The social model of disability was what should guide the support and assistance to people with intellectual disabilities in Wales. So what sorts of services were developed over those years since 1983? For children and young people and their family carers, there was an emphasis on trying to develop short-term care options so that people, the parents particularly of a child or a young person with an intellectual disability, had some respite, some opportunity to have a break from the arduous, often responsibilities of caring 24/7 for their loved child or young person. Those would be in small community-based, usually accommodations. There was also the development of a pattern of service called Family Links, where volunteer families were recruited to establish a link with a family containing a disabled child or young person, and those volunteer families would provide short breaks, again to give an opportunity for the parent or carer to have a break from the responsibilities of caring. For children and young people, communication therapies, other forms of therapy were improved and developed within community. As the child and young person grows up, there has been some emphasis on assisting that person to develop independent skills, life skills, how to live, how to cook, how to care for themselves, how to travel on public transport. But then, of course, where does somebody live if they want to live away from the family home once they're an adult? There was a strong emphasis on developing patterns of accommodation based in the community, in ordinary street houses in ordinary streets, and where the typical number of people living in those houses was no more than 3 or 4 people. That was quite different to developments in England, where although there was a strong commitment to closing mental handicap hospitals and institutions, people lived in new accommodation, which typically was for an average of 13 occupants. We've had a very ideological approach in Wales, which has required people to live in much smaller scale settings, hopefully where there will be less characteristics of institutional life taking root. There has also been some work towards giving people vocational training in their early years of adulthood, in job tasting, and in trying out supported employment opportunities. So we had a situation in 1983 where 3,200 people were living in these horrible institutions. Those institutions have all closed now. People living in group homes, the statistics are a little bit complicated, but broadly the similar number are now living in small-scale settings. But we still have about 8,000 people living in the family home. I'm not saying that things are perfect in Wales by any means, but we have walked down and moved down a very different pattern of services since 1983. So increasingly, policy, not just for people with intellectual disabilities, but other people who need services from the state or from the municipality. There's been an increasing emphasis by the Welsh Government that services must be person-centred and must be built up and designed to meet the needs of the individual. Again, very strongly following the key fundamentals within the UN Convention. So assessments should be carried out by the municipality with the individual with an intellectual disability, and those assessments must be designed to establish the needs, wishes and wants of the individual and try and work to develop services based on those needs. So there should be an explicit role for advocates, and those possibilities are fragile, but certainly there are opportunities for people with an intellectual disability to have advocacy assistance if their rights are being ignored, or if the service options that they are being offered are inadequate or inappropriate. One of the things that has developed in Wales, albeit slowly, is an option to receive direct payments. This is it is subject to a means test by the municipality, and it is subject to judgments being made about whether the person can effectively use or handle a direct payment. But it can be used to purchase services. It can be purchase those services from the municipality itself, from NGOs who provide services, for profit organisations, services can be purchased, and it can even purchase in certain carefully structured situations. Services can be bought from family members. So that is an option that is available not just to people with intellectual disability, but to people who have other needs and wants. So in Wales, in 2006-2007, only 271 people received a direct payment. By 2013-2014, 1,214 people were receiving a direct payment. Across all client groups, you can see that the growth has mirrored that. There has been an increase from 1,200 people receiving direct payments to 4,100 people receiving a direct payment. A concept which is taking increasing hold in parts of the United Kingdom, but also in other countries in Europe, is the concept of personalisation. And this has been defined by the English Department of Health as saying that every person who receives support, whether provided by statutory services or themselves, will have choice and control over the shape of that support in all the care settings that they live in or come across. And there has been quite rapid progress towards that route, particularly in England, and steps increasingly in Scotland. In England now, I'll just say a word or two about the elements in it. The stages are that the person with an intellectual disability who requires services would take part in an assessment of their needs, which is partly self-directed, so they would be quite influential with support in identifying their own needs. The municipality would then determine what sum of money would be available to the person, and the municipality would assist the person to plan how their support needs will be met. The whole purpose is to give more choice and more control to the person with an intellectual disability. Sorry, I'll just stick with personalisation for a minute. So in England, they have had quite a drive towards personalisation. I think it's perhaps been pushed too quickly, and perhaps not always in the right way. but 600,000 people are now receiving a budget for their own personal care, which they can use to their own need, to meet their own needs. In Scotland, 500,000 people, no, sorry, 5,000 people are receiving payments. And if you look to mainland Europe, in Finland, 14,000 people approximately are receiving cash payments, which they use for personal assistance. In Netherlands, 130,000 people with disabilities are receiving cash payments. But apparently they have to be living in certain residential care settings to receive that money. And in Flanders, as I understand it, 2,000 people are receiving direct payment, cash payments. So the world is changing. So I think that does pose challenges for all of us. We have lots of problems in Wales. We have waiting lists to access services. And as I said, we still have quite a large number of people living in the family home, and they probably don't want to stay in the family home. But we all, in whatever country we live in, we face challenges. The municipality or our national governments face challenges. We must wake up and recognise our responsibilities to all of our citizens, whether they have a disability or not. And I have to say, in our National Assembly, we had the benefit of a modern building being built in 1999, but there was a tremendous argument about physical access to that building for disabled people. Because of course certain compromises were made, but the debating chamber is fully accessible. And I think that's something that every institution, democratic institution, has to look at very carefully, how all of its citizens can take part fully in its proceedings. So I think that there is a challenge for governments and for municipalities to look at what the UN Convention really means for us and the challenges that it poses. I would say that we must, as municipalities and governments, be adopting the social model of disability, and we must be following through what that really means. It means planning services around what the individual needs and wishes and wants, and not simply taking a one-size-fits-all route. And I think I've put up the baggy jumper that might fit all sorts of people there. And by contrast, I've put up the very tailored little pullover that is on the dog, which has clearly been individually designed to suit the dog. I'm not sure that dogs should really wear tailored pullovers, but nonetheless, there you are. I'm trying to make a visual indication of the difference. Service providers face challenges too. We have to, if we are service providers, we have to review our relationship with the people that we support. Are we really looking at the UN Convention and what it means for how we approach and plan our services? Sometimes we are doing it, sometimes we struggle. As service providers, we need to not be sitting in our corner of the field, individually making our own idea of a wheel. We must be looking at good practice elsewhere, within our region, within our country, in other countries, and learning from other people's experience, not saying that we are unique, we have to have a special wheel that only suits our needs. We have to model our services so that they are person-centred, and that where we focus on what the outcomes for the individual are. What do we want working with the individual? What do we want the service to achieve for that individual? And we must find ways to work with the individual to co-produce our services, to monitor what we're doing, to review what we're doing, and to develop what we're doing together with the people that we're supporting. So I think we need to sit around that table working together. There are challenges too for people with disabilities. Some of them are a bit uncomfortable. And certainly in Wales, where often, because of the nature of our society, we're not used to challenging authority. We're used to a situation where services are offered on a top-down basis historically, and where they're received with gratitude. But that is changing. We're facing the financial crisis just as much as probably Wallonia is, and disabled people are facing situations where their services are being cut. So certainly disabled people, it's hard, but you have to be assertive in demanding recognition of your rights as citizens. You have to engage the political parties, whoever will listen to you, and identify champions within those parties who will speak up for you and help give you a voice. And you must use the precedent of schemes like the BAP scheme that you are fortunate to have in Wallonia, and ensure that they're better fit for purpose and meet your needs, and argue for them to be improved if they need to be. And you must insist. All our governments have signed up to the UN Convention. We must insist that that becomes a reality. They don't just sign it, they actually live the UN Convention. And we should look at how, I think, you should hold service providers to account and insist that they begin to co-produce services with you if they already haven't done so. I'm conscious of time, I'm sorry. What is co-production? A network and an alliance in Wales has defined co-production as being a process which enables citizens and professionals to share power and work together in equal partnership, to create opportunities for people to access support when they need it, and to contribute to social change together. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Maslow's ladder. This is a ladder around co-production and approaches to how we engage and work with our fellow citizens. If we don't listen to them at all, we just impose what we want to do, we are coercing them, then that's at the bottom of the ladder. If we still believe that our view is right, we just need to educate people who receive services to take them into that route, then we are educating. We can be informing, but really what we ought to be doing is trying to move up that continuum towards co-production. We have to move from an approach, a top-down approach, which is about saying, what do you need if you're going to receive a service? What are you eligible for? And how do you fit into the systems that we've got? We've got to move to an approach which is, what does a good life look like for you? What strengths can we build on? And how can we work with you to achieve your goals as an individual, as a citizen, and as a human being? We're not perfect in Wales, by all means. Don't let me leave you with that impression. We have our struggles. What we are trying to do is to ride together on some sort of bike, and but it needs to be an adapted bike so that disabled people can sit on the bike too. But we need to try and travel together. Working together, we can make some kilometres progress down the road. Thank you very much.